It is Monday, March 15th. I'm Sam Cedar.
And I'm Lucy Steiner. Which one of these stories will you be talking about today?
The Washington Post reports that Immigrants and Customs Enforcement is dropping off asylum seekers who are positive for COVID-19 at bus stops with no prior warning to the activist groups who are trying to unite them with families or find them housing. Meanwhile, New York State's vaccine czar reportedly questioned local officials as to their loyalty to embattled New York Governor Andrew Cuomo. And lastly, despite the sweeping measures included in the new COVID relief bill, the new stimulus payments aren't exempt from debt collection, and it's Congress's job to make sure standalone legislation fixes that as soon as possible.
You're listening to Majority.fm's AM Quickie, and these are the stories you need to know.
The immigration crisis has not let up in the first months of Joe Biden's presidency. The Washington Post reports that some forces Trump enabled are still enacting brutal policies toward people who come here seeking a better life. The Post reports that for weeks, Immigrants and Customs Enforcement has been dropping off COVID-positive detainees at bus stations with no prior warning to the activist groups or family members trying to find them homes or housing. ICE claims that it's their policy to notify local authorities when they release a detainee that has COVID. But some county officials say they had no idea when and where immigrants carrying the disease would be released. Let's be clear, this danger is in no way the fault of the immigrants themselves, who are often crammed in unsafe and overcrowded detention facilities that are hotbeds for COVID. In fact, as we reported last week, the number of unaccompanied minors has skyrocketed at the border. Recently, the New York Times reports that the Biden administration has asked FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, to step in and help house some of the children that had previously been forced into sparse adult facilities run by Customs and Border Protection. These kids are supposed to be cared for and helped by the Department for Health and Human Services, which has a spotty record in that respect to start with, has so far failed to adequately handle the influx of new immigrants as well. It seems that even if Biden has good intentions, America's immigration system is still broken beyond any easy repair. Meanwhile, the depths of Andrew Cuomo's alleged corruption continue to sink. The Washington Post reports that New York State's so-called vaccine czar, a longtime Cuomo advisor, called up local officials and grilled them over their loyalty to the governor amid the ongoing sexual harassment investigation. Cuomo called a deranged press conference on Friday where he refused to resign, said he wouldn't, quote, bow to cancel culture, end quote. While this has been going on over the past few weeks, the Post reports that the man involved in determining who gets vaccines in New York State has been leaning on local officials to curry favor for the governor. The vaccine czar's name is Larry Schwartz. He's a self-admitted 30-year friend of Cuomo's who earned the reputation as his, quote, enforcer during a long career in Albany. Schwartz even admitted making the calls to county officials, although he insisted they were of a personal nature and not in his official capacity. Still, one local official was so disturbed about the timing of one of Schwartz's calls right after a vaccine supply meeting that he filed notice for impending ethics complaint. According to the Post, Schwartz was asking officials what their position was, trying to ascertain whether or not they'd be changing their public statements as the evidence against Cuomo mounted, basically trying to see who would denounce the governor next. Sure, this could all be an incredible coincidence, but if we know anything about how Andrew Cuomo does politics at this point, wouldn't be a surprise for one of his friends, who happens to control vaccine supply in the state, to imply that staying on the governor's good side was important for lower-level local officials.
Majority.fm's AM Quickie is fueled by JustCoffee.coop. Just Coffee is a worker-owned coffee roaster based in Madison, Wisconsin that has sponsored the Majority Report for nearly a decade. Check out their collection of fair trade roasts, including our own Majority Report blend. And regardless of what you order, receive 10% off your order when you use the code MAJORITY at checkout. And all shipping is free. That's coupon code MAJORITY at JustCoffee.coop.
Stimulus checks started hitting American bank accounts this weekend in what was surely a welcome relief for many hardworking people who have been struggling to make ends meet over the past year. But Common Dreams reports that the architects of the American Rescue Plan did not build in protections against debt collectors into the signed bill last week. That means debt collectors and companies could immediately suck the stimulus payments out of people's bank accounts. We saw this happen with the CARES Act, which also lacked similar protections. While the stimulus was a boon for some, It was also a huge windfall for predatory debt collectors seeking to make their money back as quickly as possible in spite of the recession. The $600 payments we got in December did have protections against this, which is why it's so damaging that the $1,400 checks don't have the same. Because of the laws governing the reconciliation process, lawmakers were unable to include this in the most recent COVID relief bill. Now, lawmakers will have to pass an independent bill protecting stimulus payments from debt collectors, and who knows how long that will take. Oregon Senator Ron Wyden has already pledged to introduce protective legislation, but as the American Prospect already noted, for debts that have already seen a court judgment, that protection will be too late. The collectors can take it already. A stopgap measure would stop new debt judgments from swiping the stimulus checks, but for many Americans, this weekend's windfall will be pretty short-lived.
And now for some quicker quickies.
Quicker quickie.
Internal documents obtained by the Washington Post show that Facebook is conducting a sweeping internal review of what kind of content is fueling vaccine skepticism on their service. And sure enough, the Post reports that it's turning up all kinds of QAnon-adjacent material that isn't technically against the platform's rules. Sounds like they should make some new rules. Senior U.S. officials claim that they were ready to sit down with Iran as early as today and re-enter the Iran nuclear deal, but both sides have been offering conflicting and combative statements in recent weeks that have stonewalled or derailed any negotiations. We'll have to see if Biden's consultant-stacked State Department can make any meaningful headway, but just a reminder, we're the ones who broke that agreement. We should sit down and offer them whatever it takes to get them back to the table. Peaceful vigil for Sarah Everard, the 33-year-old woman who was allegedly kidnapped and killed by a London police officer, was forcefully disrupted by the UK's largest police force on Saturday, showing that the US is far from having a monopoly on out-of-control state violence. And in the U.S., rallies marking the one-year anniversary of Breonna Taylor's death took place in several major cities, while in Taylor's hometown of Louisville, Kentucky's GOP-controlled state legislature passed a bill criminalizing insulting police officers.
Quicker quickie.
Hey, that's all for today's AM Quickie. Yeah, join us this afternoon at noon or later as a podcast.